A spark in the night. The sea was a restless beast, its waves clawing at the rocky shore beneath a sky bruised with clouds. It was 4:44 a.m. on June 3, 2025, and a low hum pierced the darkness, the sound of a device hidden beneath the Kerch bridge's towering pillars. In a Kyiv control room hundreds of kilometers away, a young operative named Mykola froze his finger hovering over a button that could ignite 100 kilograms of explosives. His breath caught the weight of a nation's defiance pressed into that single moment. The screen before him flickered, showing the bridge's silhouette, a steel giant stretching across the Black Sea, its lights like distant stars. A bead of sweat traced his temple, his heart pounding in rhythm with the waves. One press, one spark, he thought, and the world changes. The clock ticked each second, a drumbeat in the silence, as the bridge stood unaware, its pillars rooted in waters that hid a secret. Hours earlier, the plan had seemed a distant dream, a whisper in the shadowed halls of Ukraine's security service. The Kerch Bridge, a 19-kilometer lifeline connecting Crimea to Russia, was more than steel and concrete. It was a symbol, a thread in the war's vast tapestry. Mykola, a 26-year-old from Kharkiv, had joined the SBU not as a soldier but as a technician, his hands more accustomed to circuits than weapons. Now he sat in a concrete bunker, his screen a window to a battlefield he'd never touch. Beside him, Sofia, a signals expert, and Dmitro, a logistics planner, watched their own monitors, their faces taut with the same unspoken fear. What if we fail? The night was young, the mission just beginning, and the spark they carried was a fragile hope in a war that spared no one. Context: the stage of the Kerch strike. On June 3, 2025, the Russia-Ukraine war had carved deep lines across a weary world. Now, in its third year, the conflict was a mosaic of frontline sieges and unseen operations that reached far beyond the battlefields of Donbass. The Kerch Bridge, a 19-kilometer marvel of engineering spanning the Kerch Strait, stood as a vital artery linking Crimea to Russia's mainland. Its steel arches and concrete pillars carried not just vehicles but the weight of strategy, ferrying supplies and reinforcing a contested peninsula. To strike it was to touch a nerve in the war's vast body, a move that demanded precision, secrecy, and a courage that burned quietly in the hearts of those who planned it. The Kerch Strait, where the Black Sea met the Sea of Azov, was a restless expanse, its waters churning under summer winds. The bridge itself was a colossus, its twin spans, one for road, one for rail, stretching across the horizon like a ribbon of steel. Flanked by Taman's low hills on one side and Crimea's rocky shores on the other, it was both exposed and fortified, watched by cameras, patrols, and anti-air defenses. The surrounding landscape was stark, shallow waters dotted with fishing boats, salt marshes glinting under the sun, and distant villages, unaware of the storm brewing in the night. The bridge's isolation was its strength, but also its vulnerability, a target that seemed untouchable, yet beckoned to those who dared. The weather on that June night played a subtle but critical role. A warm front had settled over Ukraine, bringing humid air and scattered thunderstorms to Kyiv, where the operations planners worked in secrecy. Over the Kerch Strait, the forecast was clearer. A light breeze rippled the water, and clouds veiled the moon, offering a cloak of darkness for the mission. But the sea's currents were unpredictable, a challenge for any device navigating beneath the waves. The plan, whispered in the halls of Ukraine's security service SBU, relied on stealth unmanned devices, perhaps drones or explosives, delivered under cover of night to strike the bridge's underbelly. The details were guarded, known only to a select few, their secrecy, a shield against the war's ever-watchful eyes. Globally, the war remained a fault line in a fractured world. Nations debated aid and sanctions, their capitals humming with diplomatic maneuvers, while the Kerch Bridge stood as a symbol of control, its silhouette a fixture in newsreels and debates. To disrupt it was to send ripples beyond the battlefield, altering the flow of supplies and the balance of resolve. The SBU's planners, a mix of seasoned operatives and young innovators, worked in a Kyiv bunker, their maps marked with the bridge's coordinates, their minds racing with the stakes. Failure could embolden defenses, while success might shift the war's unseen currents, a gamble measured in steel and sacrifice. For the operatives, the context was both distant and intimate. They were not soldiers charging into battle, but technicians and planners, their weapons, code maps, and silent machines. They came from Ukraine's cities and villages, their lives reshaped by the war's relentless march. The bridge was more than a target. It was a test of their ingenuity, their nerve, and their hope for a future where such missions were no longer needed. As the clock ticked toward the operation's launch, they gathered in their hidden spaces, their faces lit by the glow of screens, their hearts carrying the weight of a nation's unspoken prayers. The stage was set, the sea restless, and the night ready to unfold. Backstory and inner world. In a dimly lit bunker beneath Kiev's restless streets, 3 figures sat in the glow of monitors, their eyes fixed on the faint outline of a mission that could reshape the war. Mykola, Sofia, and Dmytro were the quiet architects of the Kerch bridge, strike their hands, guiding a plan as delicate as it was bold. They were not soldiers in the traditional sense, but their hearts bore the weight of a nation's hope. Each carried a story, a reason for being there, and a silent struggle that bound them in the crucible of their task. Mykola, 26, was a son of Kharkiv, a city of wide boulevards and stubborn spirit. Before the war, he was an electrician. His days spent wiring homes and dreaming of building a life with his fiancée Anna. The war stole that dream when Kharkiv's skyline burned and Anna fled to safety abroad, her letters now his only tether to a past life. Mykola joined the SBU after repairing a damaged power grid under shelling, his hands steady, but his heart heavy with loss. The Kerch Bridge mission was his first major operation, a chance to prove his worth not to the war, but to the people he could no longer protect in person. As he sat before his screen, his fingers tracing the controls, he thought, "What if this is all I can give?" The doubt lingered, but so did his resolve, a flicker of light in his tired eyes. Sofia, 29, was the team's signals expert, her mind a labyrinth of code and frequencies. Born in Mariupol, she'd grown up sketching the sea's horizon, her dreams tied to a future in tech. The war took her city, her family scattered, and her sketches replaced by maps of signal jammers and satellite paths. She joined the SBU after escaping Mariupol's siege, her skills honed in makeshift workshops where she built communication systems from salvaged parts. The Kerch Bridge was her test, a chance to outwit the defenses guarding its steel frame. Her fingers danced across her keyboard, but her thoughts drifted to her brother lost in the war's early days. "I can't bring you back," she thought, "but I can make this count." Her calm exterior hid a storm of grief and determination, her heart racing with every signal she sent. Dmytro, 32, was the logistics planner, a former history teacher from Odessa with a knack for details. His classroom once echoed with tales of empires and revolutions, but the war turned his lessons into maps of supply routes and covert paths. His wife and daughter were safe in Poland, their voices a distant comfort in late-night calls. Dmytro's role was to ensure the explosives reached the bridge, a puzzle of timing, tides, and secrecy. He carried a small notebook, its pages filled with sketches of the Kerch Strait, a teacher's habit now turned to war. "I'm no hero," he thought, "but I'm here for them." The weight of his family's absence pressed against him, yet his steady hand guided the team, his quiet humor, a lifeline in the bunker's tension. Together, they were a fragile constellation, their skills interwoven like threads in a tapestry. Mykola's hands, once wired for circuits, now held the trigger of a distant spark. Sofia's code was a shield, her signals a whisper against the war's roar. Dmytro's maps were a bridge of their own, connecting plans to reality. The bunker was their world, cramped, cold, alive with the hum of machines and the weight of their shared purpose. They laughed softly over shared tea, traded stories of home, and held each other's fears in silent understanding. Outside, the war churned, but here they were bound by a mission that tested their courage and their humanity. As the hours ticked toward the operation's launch, they sat together, their faces lit by the glow of screens, their hearts heavy with the stakes. Mykola saw Anna's smile in every shadow. Sophia heard her brother's voice in the sea's imagined waves. Dmytro clutched his notebook, its pages a promise to his daughter. They were not just operatives but bearers of a nation's quiet defiance. Their inner worlds, a mosaic of fear, hope, and love, ready to face the night that awaited them. Movement on the way to battle. The night of June 2, 2025 wrapped Kiev in a humid embrace, the city's pulse softened by the hum of distant thunder. In a bunker hidden beneath a nondescript building, Mykola, Sophia, and Dmytro moved through their tasks with the precision of a clock's gears, each motion heavy with the weight of the mission ahead. The Kerch Bridge, a steel lifeline spanning the Black Sea, was their target, a structure that carried more than vehicles but the hopes and strategies of a war that refused to pause. The operation, months in the making, was now hours from its climax, and the air in the bunker crackled with anticipation and unspoken fears. The journey to this moment had begun weeks earlier in shadows cast by secrecy. In a coastal facility near Odessa, operatives had prepared the tools of the strike: unmanned devices, perhaps drones or submersible explosives, their designs a blend of ingenuity and desperation. These machines, small but potent, were loaded onto boats under the cover of night, their hulls cutting through the Black Sea's waves toward the Kerch Strait. The route was treacherous, weaving past patrols and surveillance guided by Dmytro's maps and Sophia's signals. Mykola, trained to control the final strike, had spent days in simulators, his hands learning the rhythm of a device he'd never see, his mind tracing the bridge's silhouette from grainy satellite images. Now, in the bunker, the trio faced the final hours before launch. The room was a cocoon of flickering screens and whispered updates, the scent of damp concrete mingling with the tang of coffee. Outside, Kiev stirred restlessly, its streets quiet, but for the occasional wail of sirens, a reminder of the war's ever-present shadow. Mykola checked his console, its screen showing a test feed from a device already in the strait, its camera capturing the dark churn of waves. The bridge was still hours away, but he could feel its presence, a distant giant waiting in the night. For Anna, for home. He thought, his fingers tightening on the controls, his heart heavy with the weight of her absence. Sophia sat at her station, her monitors alive with the signal patterns, each line a thread keeping their devices hidden from detection. Her headset pressed against her ears, drowning out the bunker's hum with the rhythm of her own pulse. She sipped from a thermos, the tea's warmth a fleeting anchor to Mariupol's lost shores. One mistake and it's over, she thought, her mind racing to anticipate jammers or radar sweeps. She glanced at Mykola, his focus unbroken, and felt a surge of trust. They were a team, their skills interwoven, their fears shared in the silence between commands. Her fingers paused, then resumed guiding signals through the night's digital maze. Dmytro stood before a digital map, its projection casting faint light across his face. The Kerch Strait stretched across the screen, its currents and checkpoints marked in red. His routes were a gamble, balancing tide's patrols and the sea's unpredictability. He adjusted his notebook, its pages filled with sketches of the bridge's pillars, a teacher's precision turned to war. For my daughter, he thought, picturing her smile in a Polish village far from harm. He murmured coordinates, his voice steady but laced with the weight of what lay ahead. The devices, now positioned in the strait, waited like silent sentinels, their payloads hidden beneath the waves. As midnight passed, the bunker grew quieter, the team's movements deliberate. The devices were in place, their signals faint but steady, guided by Sophia's code and Dmytro's paths. Mykola tested his controls, the simulator's hum a faint echo of the sea. The air was heavy with tension but also with fleeting moments of connection. Sophia's soft laugh at a shared memory, Dmytro's hand resting briefly on Mykola's shoulder, the clink of a thermos passed between them. Outside, the sea churned under a clouded sky, its waves a rhythm that matched their racing hearts. The clock ticked closer to 4 a.m., and the first signals blinked on Sophia's screen, confirming the device's positions beneath the bridge. Mykola's console hummed its feed, ready to light up with a strike. Dmytro's map showed their paths converging, a web of precision and hope. They exchanged a glance, a wordless pact, forged in the night's quiet. The bunker felt smaller now, the world reduced to screens and signals, yet vast with the weight of their purpose. They were not just operatives, but bearers of a spark, ready to ignite a moment that would echo across the sea. The battle begins. Twist and struggle. The night of June 3, 2025, hung heavy over the Kyiv bunker, its air thick with the hum of anticipation and the faint tang of ozone from glowing screens. Mykola, Sofia, and Dmytro sat at their stations, their faces lit by the cold flicker of monitors, each a window to the Kerch bridge, 19 kilometers of steel stretching across the Black Sea. The operation was no longer a plan, but a pulse, its rhythm carried by unmanned devices now positioned beneath the bridge's pillars, their payloads poised to ignite. The trio's hands moved with practiced precision, but their hearts raced with the weight of the moment. A fragile thread of hope stretched taut across the war's vast canvas. Mykola's screen showed a grainy feed from the lead device codenamed Silas Strength, a name he'd chosen to anchor his resolve. The device, hidden in the strait's dark waters, hovered near a pillar, its camera capturing the bridge's underbelly, a maze of steel and shadow. Mykola's fingers gripped the controls, guiding Sila through the sea's currents, its path a delicate dance to avoid detection. His headset buzzed faintly, the sound of waves a distant echo in his ears. For Anna, for Kharkiv, he thought, his mind flashing to the city's scarred streets. The pillar loomed closer, its concrete a silent giant, and Mykola's breath steadied his focus, narrowing to a single point of light on his screen. Sofia's station was a fortress of signals, her monitors alive with data streams that kept the devices cloaked from Russian defenses. Her fingers danced across the keyboard, adjusting frequencies to counter jammers lurking along the strait. Her thermos sat untouched, the tea within cold, her mind too consumed to pause. One slip and we're exposed, she thought, her eyes scanning for threats. A monitor showed a device near the bridge's rail span, its signal steady but vulnerable to the sea's interference. She murmured commands, her voice low but sharp, rerouting signals through encrypted channels. She glanced at Mykola, his concentration unbroken, and felt a surge of trust, their bond a lifeline in the night's chaos. Dmytro watched his digital map, its projection a constellation of green dots marking the device's positions. His routes had guided them through the Black Sea's currents, past patrols and sensors to the bridge's heart. But the sea was a restless ally, its tides shifting unpredictably. He adjusted his notebook, its pages filled with sketches of the bridge's arches, his teacher's precision now a weapon. For my daughter, he thought, picturing her sleeping in Poland, safe but far. He relayed coordinates to Mykola, his voice calm but urgent. Sila is 50 meters from target, he said, his eyes tracking the map. The bridge was close now, its pillars a silent challenge, and the team moved as one, their actions a symphony of nerve and skill. The first hour unfolded in a tense rhythm, the bunker's silence broken by clipped updates. Sila, at 20 meters, Mykola reported, his voice steady but tight. Signals holding Sofia confirmed, her fingers never pausing. Rail span device in position. Dmytro added his map, a web of converging paths. The sea churned outside its waves, a distant roar, while the bridge stood unaware, its lights flickering like stars against the night. The devices moved like shadows, their hum lost in the water, each carrying a spark that could shift the war's unseen currents. Then came the twist. A red alert flashed on Sofia's screen, a device near the bridge's road span Nadia Hope had snagged on an underwater cable, its signal flickering as it struggled to free itself. We've got a problem, Sofia said, her voice cutting through the bunker's hum. Mykola's head turned, his focus torn from Sila. Dmytro leaned over his map, showing Nadia's dot faltering dangerously close to a patrol zone. It's caught, Sofia said, her hands racing to stabilize the signal. The device's battery was at 30%, too low to maneuver for long, and any sudden movement risked alerting the bridge's defenses. Mykola adjusted Nadia's controls, nudging it gently to free it. But the feed shook the device's camera, showing murky water and tangled steel. It's stuck tight, he muttered, his heart pounding. Sofia rerouted its signal, trying to mask its distress. but the risk of detection grew with every second. Dmytro traced an alternative path, his mind racing through tidal charts. "We can reroute it, but it'll drain the battery," he said, his calm fraying. The team faced a fleeting window: free Nadia and risk exposure, or abandon it and lose a critical strike on the road span. The bunker's air thickened, their breaths shallow as the sea's currents and the war's weight pressed against them. Minutes stretched into eternity, the team's movements a blur of instinct and trust. Sofia's fingers flew, boosting Nadia's signal to mask its struggle. Mykola tilted the controls, coaxing the device free with a delicate touch. Dmytro recalculated its path, guiding it toward a safer current. "It's moving." Sofia exhaled, her screen stabilizing. The device was free, but the clock was unforgiving, and the bridge loomed closer, its pillars waiting for the spark that would light the night. The sacrifice, decision, and turning point. The Kiev bunker was a pressure cooker of silence and tension, its walls seeming to close in as the clock neared 4:30 a.m. on June 3, 2025. Mykola, Sofia, and Dmytro sat at their stations, their faces bathed in the cold glow of monitors, each screen a lifeline to the devices now poised beneath the Kerch bridge. The operation to strike the 19-kilometer span across the Black Sea had reached its most delicate moment, a thread stretched taut between success and exposure. The sea churned outside its waves, a distant roar, while the bridge stood oblivious, its steel pillars casting long shadows into the water. The trio's hands moved with precision, but their hearts carried the weight of a choice that could unravel everything. Mykola's screen showed Sila, the lead device, hovering mere meters from a pillar under the bridge's rail span. The feed was murky, the water's currents swirling, but the pillar's concrete loomed clear, a target that held the mission's heart. His fingers gripped the controls, his thumb ready to trigger the payload, a spark that could cripple the bridge's rail line. His headset buzzed with the faint hum of the device, a sound that tethered him to a moment he'd never forget. For Anna, for Kharkiv. He thought, his mind flickering to his fiancée's letters, her words a beacon in the dark. The pillar was close now, the device's battery at 20%, and every second counted. Sofia's monitors flickered with signal data, her code a shield against the bridge's defenses. Her fingers danced across the keyboard, maintaining the device's invisibility. But her eyes were locked on a secondary screen showing Nadia the device they'd freed from an underwater cable. Its signal was stable, but its battery was critically low, and it was still 50 meters from the road span's target pillar. "Keep going," she urged silently, her thoughts drifting to Mariupol's lost shores. The weight of her brother's absence pressed against her, but she pushed it aside, her focus a lifeline for the team. She glanced at Mykola, his concentration a mirror of her own, and felt the bond that held them together. Dmytro stood before his digital map, its green dots marking the device's positions beneath the bridge. His roots had guided them through the strait's currents, but the sea's unpredictability was a constant threat. His notebook lay open, its sketches of the bridge's arches now a blueprint for survival. "For my daughter," he thought, picturing her smile in a distant village. He murmured updates, his voice steady but laced with urgency. "Sila is in position," he said, his eyes tracking Nadia's faltering dot. The mission was close to its climax, but the bridge's defenses were vigilant, and any misstep could light up their operation like a flare. Then came the turning point. A sharp alert flashed on Sofia's screen. A Russian patrol boat had altered course, its radar sweeping closer to Nadia's position. The device's signal flickered, its low battery making it vulnerable to detection. "We've got a problem," Sofia said, her voice cutting through the bunker's hum. Mykola's head snapped toward her, his thumb still hovering over Sila's trigger. Dmytro leaned over his map, showing the boat's path converging with Nadia's. "It's too close," he said, his teacher's calm fraying. The patrol could detect the device, exposing the entire operation and dooming the strike on the road span. The team faced an impossible choice: trigger Nadia now despite its distance from the target, and risk a weaker strike or sacrifice it as a decoy to draw the patrol away, ensuring Sila's hit on the rail span. The road span's strike was critical for supplies, but Sila's target was the bridge's symbolic heart. Mykola's breath caught his mind racing. We can't lose both. He thought, his heart heavy with the stakes. Sophia's fingers paused, her eyes meeting Mykola's. If we use Nadia as a decoy, we save Sila, she said, her voice tight. Dimitro nodded his map, confirming the boat's approach. But we lose the road span. He added, his words a quiet weight. The bunker fell silent, the hum of machines deafening in its own way. Mykola's hand trembled, his thumb still poised over Sila's trigger. Do it, he said, his voice barely audible, a decision forged in trust. Sophia rerouted Nadia's signal to flare brightly, drawing the patrol's radar like a moth to light. Dimitro adjusted Sila's path, guiding it closer to the pillar. Mykola pressed the button, and his screen flared white. A silent explosion rippling through the water, the railspan's pillar shuddering in the night. Nadia was lost, its signal vanishing as the patrol closed in. The trio sat in stunned silence, the cost of their choice sinking in. Mykola's hands shook the flare of Sila's strike, a fleeting triumph against Nadia's sacrifice. Sophia stared at her screen, her breath shallow, the weight of her code's failure heavy. Dimitro folded his notebook, his heart aching for the road span they'd lost. Yet the mission pressed on the bridge's rail span, wounded its steel heart, touched by a spark that would echo across the war. Aftermath, the cost and silence. The Kyiv bunker was cloaked in a silence heavier than the dawn that crept across the city. It was just past 5 a.m. on June 3, 25, and the Kerch bridge operation had left its mark, a single spark that had shaken the steel giant spanning the Black Sea. Mykola, Sophia, and Dimitro sat at their stations, their screens now dim, the flicker of feeds replaced by static and the weight of what they had done. The rail span of the bridge bore the scar of Sila's strike. Its pillar wounded, its tracks twisted in a burst of fire and water. But Nadia's loss meant the road span stood untouched, a silent reminder of the sacrifice made to protect the mission. The trio's faces, etched with exhaustion, carried the quiet pride and ache of a night that had changed them. Mykola leaned back, his hands, still the controls before him, now lifeless. The flare of Sila's explosion lingered in his mind, a burst of light that had cracked the bridge's rhythm. Reports filtering through encrypted channels confirmed the damage. The rail span, a vital thread for supplies, was crippled, its steel bent under the weight of their spark. But the road span's survival gnawed at him, a half-finished task that echoed his own doubts. Did I do enough for Anna, for Kharkiv? He wondered, his fingers tracing the edge of a photo in his pocket, his family's faces a distant warmth. The bunker's cold air offered no comfort, only the echo of his own heartbeat, slow and heavy. Sophia stared at her monitors, their signals faded, the code that had guided Sila to its target now a ghost in her system. Nadia's loss was a bruise on her heart, a failure she couldn't outrun. She had woven a web of signals to shield the devices, but one had fallen, its sacrifice saving the mission but leaving her hollow. Her thermos sat cold, its tea untouched, a relic of a night that had demanded everything. She thought of Mariupol, its waves now a memory, and her brother whose absence was a shadow in her chest. I kept them hidden, but not all, she thought, her eyes tracing the bunker's cracks, each one a map of her own fragility. Yet in the silence, she felt a flicker of pride. The team had struck a blow unseen, but felt. Dimitro folded his notebook, its pages of sketches now a record of a mission half complete. His map, once alive with green dots, was quieter now. Nadia's absence a void on the screen. The railspan's damage was a step toward a future where his daughter might know peace, but the road span's endurance was a weight he carried. I planned every move, he thought, but the sea chose its own path. His teacher's calm had held the team together, but now in the stillness he felt the cost, a promise to his family, stretched thin by a war that spared no one. He tucked his notebook away, its weight a reminder of the home he longed to return to. The bunker's air was thick with the scent of metal and sweat, the hum of machines replaced by a quiet that felt like the world pausing. Outside, Kyiv stirred under a dawn streaked with gold, its people unaware of the spark ignited far across the sea. In the Kerch Strait, the bridge stood wounded, its railspan silent, its steel scarred by fire. No lives were lost in the strike, No blood stained the waves, but the absence of movement on the tracks was its own kind of loss. The bridge, a symbol of connection, now carried a fracture, its rhythm disrupted by unseen hands. The trio sat in the stillness, their bond forged in the night's crucible. Mykola reached for his water bottle, his hand brushing Sofia's thermos, a small gesture that grounded them. Sofia offered a faint nod, her eyes meeting his with a shared understanding. Dimitro unfolded his notebook briefly, tracing his daughter's name in its margins, a quiet vow to keep going. They didn't speak of success or failure, only of what they had carried together. The war would continue its currents unbroken, but for a moment the bridge's silence was theirs, a pause before the world turned again. The strike's ripples would be felt in time. Supplies delayed, strategies shifted, a symbol touched by defiance. But in the bunker, the cost was not in reports, but in the weight of choices, the loss of Nadia, and the sleepless nights ahead. The dawn outside painted the sky in hues of hope and shadow, a reminder of time's relentless march. Mykola, Sofia, and Dimitro rose their movements, slow, their hearts carrying the quiet pride of having dared the impossible. Reflection. Message to viewer. The dawn light filtered through the bunker's narrow window, casting a soft glow across the concrete floor in Kiev. It was June 3, 2025, and the Kerch bridge operation had left its mark, a single spark that had touched a steel giant across the Black Sea. Mykola, Sofia, and Dimitro stood together, their screens now dark, their bodies weary from a night that had tested their resolve. The railspan of the bridge bore the scar of their strike. Its tracks silenced, but the road span stood untouched, a reminder of the sacrifice they had made. The bunker was quiet, its air heavy with the weight of their shared journey, a moment where courage, loss, and hope intertwined. Mykola sat with his hands folded, his controls silent, the photo of his family resting on the console. The flare of Sila's strike lingered in his mind, a burst of light that had fractured the bridge's rhythm. He thought of Kharkiv, its streets scarred but enduring, and of Anna, her letters a lifeline across borders. The mission had been a step toward protecting that world, but Nadia's loss weighed on him, a choice that saved the strike, but left a hollow ache. What does it mean to fight like this? He wondered, his eyes tracing the photo's edges. To carry a nation's hope in a spark, knowing no one will ever know your name. The dawn's light offered no answers, only a quiet promise of another day to carry on. Sofia leaned against her station, her thermos cold, its chipped surface a relic of the night's intensity. The code she had woven had guided Sila to its target, but Nadia's fall was a shadow she couldn't shake. She thought of Mariupol, its waves a memory that anchored her, and of her brother, whose absence was a quiet wound. The strike had been a triumph of skill, a testament to their teamwork, but it was also a reminder of limits. We gave all we had. She thought, her fingers brushing the keyboard now still. In the bunker's silence, she felt a flicker of pride, not for the damage done, but for the trust she shared with Mykola and Dimitro, a bond forged in the crucible of a single night. Dimitro stood by the window, the dawn's gold catching the lines of his face. His notebook filled with sketches of the bridge lay closed, a record of a plan that had shifted the war's unseen currents. The railspan's silence was a step toward a future where his daughter might know peace, but the roadspan's endurance was a weight he carried. I mapped their paths, he thought, but the war maps us all. His teacher's heart longed for a classroom, for stories of history rather than war, but the mission had shown him the strength in quiet defiance. He tucked his notebook away, its pages a promise to his family, a vow to keep building toward a brighter dawn. The bunker was a world apart, its walls holding the echoes of their choices. They had dared the impossible, sent a spark across the sea, and touched a symbol that loomed larger than its steel. The war would go on, its tides relentless, but this moment was theirs, a pause where their courage, sacrifice, and humanity shone. They exchanged a glance. No words needed their bond, a thread stronger than the bridge they had struck. The dawn outside painted the sky in hues of hope and shadow, a canvas for their unspoken dreams. What does it mean to carry a spark in a war's darkness? To make a choice that ripples beyond the horizon unseen by those it protects. Mykola. Sofia and Dimitro bore no titles of heroism, only the weight of their actions and the hope that their spark might light a path to peace. Their story is not of steel or fire, but of hearts that beat in defiance of despair. What would you do in their place, faced with a moment that asks everything? How would you carry the weight of a single night that changes the world? This story was inspired by real events and people. Some details have been fictionalized for emotional narrative purposes. Join us at Ukraine Frontline War Stories to hear more untold tales of courage and humanity from the Russia-Ukraine war. Subscribe to our channel, share your thoughts in the comments. What does it mean to hold hope in the face of conflict? Let these stories of resilience and sacrifice linger, reminding us of the strength that shines through the darkest nights.